What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Home Built Workshop. Today we're going to make this cool mason jar organizer using some live edge elm. Stay tuned. Have you guys ever come across one of those projects that's really simple to build but is super useful? You wonder why you haven't made 30 of these things before? This is one of those projects. You don't need a whole arsenal of tools. You don't need a whole lot of supplies. There's only a handful of things that you are going to need for this project. All you're going to need are some mason jars, some hose clamps, a few screws, and you're gonna need some kind of a board. Which for me, I'm using this piece of elm that I cut up with a chainsaw about a year ago. It is dry, I'm gonna use it for this project, but you do not need to use this kind of wood. You could use anything pretty much that you have around. If you wanna buy a small piece at the lumber yard, if you wanna use a piece of a 2x4, some recycled fencing, some pallet wood, pretty much any piece of wood that you can find will work for this project. The thickness does not matter for this particular piece as long as the screws that you're gonna use do not poke through the back. So let's jump right in and get this thing made. I'm gonna begin my build by establishing a center line on my piece of wood, and this is because I'm using a live edge chunk. It's not nice and square. If you're working with a square piece, this part's not necessary. Now I'm gonna trim my piece down to length. This side's got a big split on it, so I'm just gonna cut that off. I'm gonna square up this end a little bit over here. Now if the piece you're working on is the size that you already need, you don't even need to cut this. I'm gonna cut mine down a little bit to fit the size that I need, also to get rid of this really bad split end, and there's a little split over here. But if the piece that you're working with is fine for you, leave it alone. If you need to cut it down, you can use anything that you have available, whether it's a bandsaw, circular saw, hand saw, a camp saw, anything that you can use to cut your piece down will work just fine. Just for the sake of speed, I'm gonna do mine on the bandsaw. And now I'll just take a couple of minutes and figure out where I want my jars to live, as well as the spacing that I want for my jars. So remember, when you're spacing out your jars, there are no hard and fast rules. You can put them wherever you feel looks the best to you. You can stagger them, put them at different heights, put them at different spacing, farther apart, closer together. As long as it looks good to you, it's gonna be just fine. Now all we need to do is drill a little pilot hole for the screw. And now I'll just give it a light sanding to remove any sharp edges and splinters. If you wanted to do any sort of distressing to your board, now would be the time to do it. And now I'm going to apply the finish. For me, I'm using a couple of coats of Danish oil, but for the finishing process, the sky is the limit. Have some fun with this step. The finishing is another area where you can have some fun. If you want to try out some different paints, maybe a milk paint, a stain, any sort of finish that you want to do, go ahead, customize this thing to make it fit your needs. That's kind of the name of the game. It's just like any project, right? You can customize it to fit what you want. Don't ever feel like because you've seen somebody do it a certain way that that's the way you need to do it. If you don't want a project to look a certain way, make it look the way you want it to look. Have some fun with it. Don't feel stuck just because you've seen it done one way or another. While that finish is drying, I've got my hose clamp lightly installed on the jars, and I'll mark out where I need to drill a hole to mount these. I've found that drilling the hole works best if you open up your hose clamp all the way so it can lay flat. Now I'll just drill the pilot holes on all four of my hose clamps, and then my particular hose clamps were a little bit long, so I just grabbed some tin snips and cut off the excess. Just a quick word of caution, when you cut these down, these edges will be very, very sharp. So use extreme caution, maybe a pair of gloves, something to protect your hands from this sharp edge. A couple passes over some sandpaper will remove that sharp edge. Now I'll install a couple of sawtooth hangers so that I can hang this on the wall. And finally, we can reinstall our hose clamps, reconnect the ends, insert the jars, and lightly snug down the hose clamp. Make sure you don't over tighten them, just snug it down so that the jar is secure. Well, there you have it, guys. This thing turned out really cool. I can't wait to put this to use. This is going to help keep a lot of things organized. You could use this for pencils, markers, crayons, that sort of thing. There are tons and tons of uses for something like this. The sky's the limit as to what you can use this for. This is a nice, quick, simple project. This shouldn't take more than a couple hours, if that. With the most basic of tools, you can put this thing together. You don't need anything fancy. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. Also, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel if you found this or any of my other videos helpful. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.